Hey guys, welcome back to the Serial at Midnight podcast, and I'm really excited about this conversation about George Pal, about Puppetoons, and the legacy of these fantasy worlds with filmmaker Arnold Leibovit. Arnold, welcome to Serial at Midnight.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Heath. Appreciate it. Nice to see you.
It's good to see you too. We've been talking about making this happen for I don't know what about a year. It's been a long time. There's two things we got to talk about here. So we got to talk about George Pal because I know that there are going to be people who are watching this or listening to this that are not familiar with all of his creations, and we got to talk about how you got involved as being sort of the caretaker of this entire this universe, really, of cinema and of cutting edge animation, like a groundbreaking animation. So, which of those things should we start with? Let's start with George Pal. How you discovered the work of George Pal.
It kind of goes back to my childhood, really. Um, growing up, I grew up in Miami, Florida, and I saw the Time Machine when I was, 9 years old. I saw it in a movie theater. It was a Carib Theater on Lincoln Road, and it was a matinee. There weren't a lot of people in the theater at the time. I remember it wasn't that busy, but I went there. I remember seeing the film at a matinee, and it was mind blowing to me.
Was
You
it part
remember
of a
that
package? Was it, like a Saturday matinee situation?
it was just a Saturday matinee show. I went. I was 9 years old,
Hmm.
and I was like blown away. It was for a young kid. I mean, I'm not the only one. A lot of people had the same experience with the Time Machine. Time Machine was one. I'll give you the other examples, but it was life changing. I mean, there's no question about it. You've never seen anything quite like it before. There has never been a time travel movie ever made before. Nobody even knew what time travel was. George, when he sold it to the studio, they didn't know what it was. They didn't
Hmm.
even know how he was going to make it. Time travel. What
Well,
is
he
that?
had already, so George Pal at that point had already been making fantasy movies essentially for about a decade because this is the man behind When Worlds Collide and The War of the Worlds, which, I mean, one of the best movies ever made, I think, as far as science fiction. The influence of that movie is huge. So it's interesting that so the Time Machine's what, 1960, so that the studio is like, what is this, But it's based on one of the foundational stories of fiction of H.G. Wells's um, original source material. That's interesting to me.
Well, he made War of the Worlds in 1953 for Paramount, and H.G. Wells' son, Frank Wells, was so impressed with George's doing of the War of the Worlds. They asked him, "What would you like to do with the Wells estate?" And George had already known about these things because a lot of people wanted to do the time machine, but the Wells estate never allowed anyone to do it. It was the prize of the estate. And they said, "Yeah, you can do it." And that's how it sort of happened. They asked him to do it, and he wanted to do it. And then he moved from Paramount to MGM, where he was able to make a better deal for himself. He had more control of the project. They didn't give him the budget he wanted, but he still was able to do amazing things for what he did. He was he was ingenuity instead of dollars. George said he was an incredible craftsman, and he knew how to do things that nobody. He could tune a, you know, uh, what's the expression? He could turn a sow's ear into
A
something
silk
beautiful.
purse, is that
Silk
it?
purse into a
Yeah.
sow's, right into a silk purse, and he was had that ability. But going back to how it happened, seeing the time machine, there were in my life there were like three key people that really influenced me. I think more than anyone. Uh, it was Ray Harryhausen. 1958, I saw the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad in a movie theater. By the way, this last weekend, we just 2 weekends ago in Tucson, the Ray Harryhausen exhibit is showing at the Mini Time Machine Museum. It's called in Tucson, of all things,
Wow.
and everyone came. Animators from all over the country were there that have admired Ray, and they have all his stuff has been brought over from England. It's in the United States now for 9 months. It's a fantastic exhibit. We're going to be tying in the Puppetoons into that exhibit that might go on the road now to
Okay.
other cities. You
Oh,
may even
wow.
might even find its way to you.
Maybe so. If not, I got to go to Arizona.
You got to see it. Just look it up, Mini Time Machine Museum. It's
Okay.
amazing. Puppetoons are going to be a play a part of it. They want to show them there and everything. Like, so there's Ray again. That was a great
Yeah.
influence to me. Seeing Seventh Voyage for me was the same experience that John Landis had when he saw it. Changed his life. Everybody I know that saw Ray's movies, it made them want to be filmmakers. The interesting thing is, in addition to Ray, there was Walt Disney. Waltz was incredibly influential to me, as
Were you a fan
everyone.
of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And anything Walt did was the biggest thing there was. And I got to meet Walt Disney when I was 12 years old, which was a real, another incredible moment in my life. That changed my life.
How was he?
He was
Yeah.
older, and busy. I was at the park. I was at Disneyland, and he had a lot of people around him. And I can't say it was like a personal one-on-one. I'm only 12 years old when it happened, but it was life-changing for me. I spent the whole day with him. Actually, I went around the park with him. I followed him around. When he went on the monorail, he was with his grandkids. And he took his grandkids on the monorail, and I was behind him in the monorail. I told my mother, This is it. I'm here. That's all I'm going to do. I just want to follow Walt. Wherever he goes, I'm there. I wanted to see him. I couldn't keep my eyes off of him. I loved him. He was an avuncular father to me growing up.
Well, you saw him
Uh,
every week on TV, right?
it was the biggest thing, and even
Hmm.
to this day, it's still the biggest thing in my life. But here's the interesting thing: Ray Harryhausen, Walt Disney, and George Pal. Well, when I finally got to meet George in the late '80s, not late '80s, excuse me, late '70s, I was doing a science fiction project, a feature film that I created. And I was friends with Dan O'Bannon, who did Alien. Dan and I were very good friends, and we were working together. This was just when Alien was coming out. And he said, you should take your project to George. And I said, George Powell? I didn't know he was still around. I wasn't really following him that closely at that point. He said, yeah. So then I was put in touch with George through Jim Danforth, who had done animation work for George on The Wonderful World of Brothers Grimm, Seven Faces of Dr. Lau, and so forth. And then I got in touch with his secretary, and I met him in his house in Beverly Hills. He was wonderful. I brought my project to him, and it was like that was a major turning point in my life. Seeing George, being with him, and I was with him. I spent time with him. I was in touch with him for a good period of time. He was just a amazing, wonderful, sweet man, and very helpful. Unfortunately, he didn't live long after that. He passed away not long after that. It was about a year after that. And that struck me pretty hard when George died.
It sounds like he'd almost become sort of a father figure to you, like a mentor figure.
He was a mentor, and as was these other two. Now, here's the interesting connection. Ray got his first job working for George. The first Puppetoon, first job he had in Hollywood was working for George on his Puppetoons. And he did Western Days in 1940. And he was only 18 years old. And then Ray, I met Ray, became friends with Ray for almost 35 years or so, and I did my film called The Fantasy Film Worlds of George Pal. So that was a connection. And then Walt Disney and George were good friends since the 1930s. When George came over in late 1930s, 38, 39, 40, they were already in touch, and they were good friends until Walt passed away. And uh, he had a great influence. George had a tremendous influence over Walt. Uh, and the point is that George embodied all the things that I admired and looked up to in my life. Here, it was everything all together wrapped up into one, everything I loved. And then I realized that everything wrapped into George. Everyone in the industry that was involved in this kind of filmmaking and interest found their way to George Pal, whether it was George Lucas or Steven Spielberg, who I ended up working with on my Time Machine movie. I mean, it didn't matter. Everything just just kind of folded into George Pal. Everybody and everything that I loved in fantasy was George Pal, basically. And he was beloved. He was absolutely beloved by the industry. He was an 8-time Academy Award winner. His Puppetoons won an Academy Award. They were nominated every year they were released in the 1940s. They were influential into the creation of animation. They influenced Walt Disney in the making of his animated movies because he was always striving for three dimensionalities with his multi-plane animation stand. And George is doing in real time three-dimensional animation. So all the animators at the studio watched the Puppetoons. Walt had George bring his Puppetoons over to the studios. I know because I knew Ward Kimball, who created Jiminy Cricket. I knew Mark Davis, who did Maleficent and Tinkerbell. I knew Frank and Ollie, who did Bambi and Fantasia. They all saw the Puppetoons. They all watched them. They were influenced by them in making the animation at the studio. And then later, audio animatronics came along, and George's Puppetoons were influenced in the making of audio animatronics. I was confirmed this through Roy Disney, who I was friends with, Roy E. Disney, which was Walt's nephew.
Right.
So that it just is this gigantic, everything wraps around George Pal in every way. It's just the interconnections are just insane, just insane.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've spent so much time in my life doing what I've been doing, because this is major stuff. This is important, and I don't think the audience knows, which is not I don't blame the audience for not knowing this. It's just that in those days the filmmakers and the background and all the technical stuff was not really publicized like it
Hmm.
is today.
Right.
You know, today everybody wants to know who the voice person was who did a character in a movie. In those days, nobody knew who did the voices, nobody knew who made the movies. They only knew one person usually. They didn't know anything else. And so George unfortunately died a little early. If he had lived little bit longer, maybe another 20 years or 15 years, I think the media would have caught up to him in the way that it should have. You
Like
know, Ray,
Harryhausen. Harryhausen's become a saint, a patron saint of the well, I was gonna say the fantasy film genre, but it's not just that. It's all genres. He's a there's a generation of monster kids who were born in the 1950s or probably even in the late 1940s who grew up in the shadow of these movies, and it influenced every aspect of their lives. And that's the generation you're talking about. And then
that's
as
my
time goes on,
generation.
yes, yeah, and then as
I'm
time
I,
goes
I,
on, it starts to become a little further.
I'm 75. I was born in 1950, and I'm of that generation.
Hmm.
And it did influence greatly. But again, it's unfortunate. Ray was able to live a little longer and is able to gain the notoriety. But it was really George Pal
Yeah.
who really was the great influencer of
What year did he die? When did he pass away? I
1980.
Yeah, so that was
1980.
before the Renaissance. And what I think part of what happened is your generation started to inherit Hollywood and get these jobs that were, filmmaker and even, behind the scenes executive level stuff. And you were able to pay your respects to the people that influenced you. But 80 is kind of before a lot of that stuff. It really happened during the 80s.
It happened during the 80s. And when I made the Puppetoon movie, which was the first one that I did, no one had known the Puppetoons before. I reacquainted a world audience to the Puppetoons that had not really been seen until the last Puppetoon was seen around 1948. And then they were seen, a few of them were seen on television, and they were in black and white. And I saw them, but they were not on for very long, and you had to catch them. So they didn't have the publicity and the recognition because they weren't being seen enough.
Hmm.
And that's basically what happened. For
Yeah.
me, of course, now you knowing my little recent documentary that I just did on the making of the Puppetoon movie, which is going to be on the Blu-ray when I release it. It was kind of that revelation for me, because when I after George passed away, and I was friends with Mrs. Powell for 20 years until she passed away. And when I first met her, it was because of seeing a Puppetoon. In her house, I watched it on a 16 millimeter
Hmm.
projector. It changed I said, oh my God. At that point, it was a revelation.
Did
I'd never
what
seen it in Technicolor before. You know the story.
Did
Yeah.
they task you? Did the pals task you with telling the story? I talked to David C. Fine, who Was behind the director's edition of Star Trek: The Motion Picture for Robert Wise, and Robert Wise's version of that movie didn't pan out like he wanted it to, and he told David C. Fine, basically finish my work. Was there anything like that for you? Did they ask you to tell their story? Okay, you're shaking your head.
No, they didn't. And by the way, I was very good friends with Robert Wise. Bob Wise was another mentor of mine.
Yeah.
He was in my documentary on George Powell. He was a great supporter of what I was doing. I loved Bob, and he was also friends with George, and so there's that connection as well. Since you
hmm
happened to mention him, he was one of the another absolute great
Yeah, and he was
people.
absolutely one of those people that, though he worked in multiple genres, if people try to, I've seen people in recent years try to say that Mr. Wise was not an auteur director because he worked in so many different genres. But I think, oh no, he was, because he made each one of those feel like something that he was a master at.
He was like William Wyler, who I never did get to meet, who I wish I had. The only connection to William Wyler I had was with Charlton Heston, but the connection for both of them, Wyler and Bryce, is that every time they did a movie, they wanted to do no two movies alike. Their idea was, I want to try a Western, or I want to try a sci-fi, or I want to try this. Wyler did that. Every movie was a different idea that he did. He wanted to try it out, and Wise was the same way. He wanted to do different things.
Well, and now we praise a director like Quentin Tarantino for doing exactly that, but that's the thing that people use to take away the credit from the people you just named.
That's right,
Yeah.
exactly. And oh, they're so. I mean, I can go. I have so many stories and so many wonderful connections. You talk about Wise and Bob, and we used to go to lunch. He used to take me to lunch during that time when we were together, and I was just in awe of him because of what he had done. But when you're a fan in the movie industry, you have to be careful. You can't kind of go overboard. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it is a business. People are still just people. They're not gods.
Right.
But then there's those moments you have where you just can't help yourself. And I
Yeah.
had that moment with Bob. I was at lunch with him at a restaurant in Beverly Hills, and we were sitting there, and I just said, look, I mean, and we'd had been already been talking for, I don't know, quite a long time. He was trying to get me into the academy, and there was all sorts of stuff going on. And I said to him, Day the Earth Stood Still. I just got into this Day the Earth Stood Still discussion. And first of all, I couldn't, that's one of, that, to me, that's the premier movie, period, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I think it's the greatest science fiction movie ever made. And so for me, that was a big deal. And I gushed over. And, he was so nice about it. He's like, what are you going to do? He's saying he just was so nice about it.
Would
But
this have been in the 1980s or
yes, it
70s?
was.
Yeah,
It was in
okay.
the 80s. And at that point, I talked to him about things like, there's things that he did. Now we're going off on a
We'll
tangent here,
come
but I
back.
can't help I
I'll
can't
steer you
help it.
back.
So the thing about Bob is that he had a wonderful sense of craft. Remember, he was Orson Welles' editor on Citizen Kane. He taught Orson Welles how to direct the movie. Orson didn't know anything about filmmaking. It was Bob Wise that taught Orson how to make Citizen Kane. Just think about that.
Yeah.
So he was a craftsman, but the nicest guy in the world. He was a sweet, wonderful man. They don't make these people anymore. I'm telling you, these people do not exist anymore in my world that I see anything like them. They were monuments in terms of human characteristics, personality,
hmm
and just in terms of just being geniuses.
Real life heroes.
They're really real life heroes. And he was like with in Day of the Earth is Still, for instance. I said I was talking to him about because I'm an editor, I'm a film editor, and he was started as a film editor. I said, I loved what you did in Day of the Earth is Still when Billy Gray is running to catch up to Patricia Neal, and you dropped all the sound. It was just him and the music. You heard no sound effects. It was all, and if you watch the film, you notice he drops all of that out of it. He wanted you to focus just on what was happening, the mystery between him and following her to find the robot. There was some very delicate things he did. And he did these things throughout the movie. He shot it like a documentary. He gave it a sense of realism that was never done before, and on a subject matter that was also never done before. and handled in a way that was never done before. Everything about it was unique. Now there were other people involved, of course. There was a screenwriter, there was a producer, Julius Bronstein. There were a
It
lot
was
of other people.
adapted from a short story.
A short
Yeah.
story. It wasn't like he was solely there, but he had the judgment to get this right. Not to mention the casting of the various people.
Hmm.
So that's a whole separate story.
Yeah.
But let's get back to George.
George
So
Pal. Yeah.
basically what happened was when I went into the process of doing this fantasy film worlds thing, I met everyone in the universe associated with George Pal. So Mrs. Powell let me have George's uh, uh, what do you call it, phone book or whatever you call it,
His contacts.
contacts. And she let me call and contact everyone that I needed to contact, basically.
Hmm.
And so everyone was there, whether it was every actor he'd worked with, every producer, everybody. And that kind of opened the door for me to kind of contact different people and whatnot. That was a huge, huge help. And then I found out that everybody just adored him. They thought he was just the most magnificent person. They loved working for him. He was such a sweet man. He very self-effacing person. He didn't have a big ego. He was really basically an artist. He was basically a craftsman. And he treated people equally. It didn't matter whether you were the head of the studio or whether you were the guy sweeping the floors. It didn't matter. Everyone to him was the same. He treated everybody equally. So then it became a life lesson for me when I started. And again, some people may disagree with this, even people that might have. In fact, I don't know anyone that really disagrees, honestly. But he wasn't a saint. He had flaws as a human being, like all people do. But it's just the way people. His involvement with people was not that story. The story was just this incredibly warm, generous person who happened to have given a leg up to an enormous number of people in the movie business who he never took credit for. People, I could give you example after example of people who became known or got famous or maybe got an award because George was the one that promoted it. And he's the one that did it. But he never took credit for anything. He just wasn't that kind of guy.
So
He
these are the
was so
people that you're contacting to talk about him in the documentary, right?
That's right. It's such self-effacement. It's so foreign to me. We live in this Heath, I don't know what to say. We live in a world today that is so cynical,
Oh yeah.
so mean-spirited,
Hmm.
so self-absorbed. I don't mean to be angry or critical. It's just that we're living in a world that is almost a completely universe compared to what it was in those days and what
Yeah.
I experienced with George. George was an equal opportunity employer. He was a first, and Walt did it to an extent. He had women working as animators at the studio. George was the same way. He had people from all over the world working on the Puppetoons, people with different languages, people with different colors of skin, people with different points of view. Everybody was working together. He didn't see a difference between big and small, large and fat and thin, or it didn't matter who you were. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
To me, that's a better world. We all live in a world of the world we live in is no man is an island. Let's put it that way.
There you go.
No man is an island.
Yeah.
We live in a world of interaction, and it's a wonderful world. It's a wonderful world if you're open to that possibility that you learn from so many things and stop being this way and
Hmm.
open yourself up to everything. And
Yeah.
that's what the film business is about. If you want to be in the film business, you really want to make films, you have to be open to the universe. You can't be just this. So George to me was an object, a lesson, a learning lesson. He was a father figure, really was to me because it kind of said to me, I live in his shadow only because um, he had such wonderful qualities, and so that is important. See, now
Hmm.
that translates into what he was working on. If you look at the films he was making, um, he had a positive view of the world. Joe talks about that in the interview that you saw, but he talks about that. The one thing that distinguishes George from so many of his contemporaries was his films had so much heart. Heart. And
Hmm.
heart for me is the key to really everlasting filmmaking, is to get to the heart. And what does that mean? It means the personal story, the love, the emotion, the connection, the caring, the feeling, uh, to identify with those qualities. And those things have found their way into all of George's movies.
Hmm.
There was a sweetness. You can't quite put your finger on it. It's sort of this sweetness. It came from his European roots. He was Hungarian. He grew up, of course, he was born in Hungary, worked in Europe before he came to the United States. And I think it's part of his European sensibilities, you know, and um, and that also was exhibited by other filmmakers who came from Europe. Billy Wilder was an example of a European. The European influence of filmmakers that came to the United States really changed the whole framework of American cinema.
Hmm.
And so there's a great important lesson to be learned from that. And George did that, I think. I think it was his European sensibility that really did it. And and so so that's so okay. So that's the story there. It's a long-winded thing we just went through. Um, but then I eventually decided that I was going to do these restorations of the Puppetoons. And those are the things that we're sort of talking about. So I went ahead and started with the Puppetoon movie, and then due
Can we
to the
explain to people before people might not know what the Puppetoons are? We might have some people that have never seen those. They are hand animated, not like a claymation or like Gumby style where you can mold the puppet into a certain thing. We're talking about there's a lot of wood, right? Multiple heads for the different puppets. This was a meticulous thing that had to have extensive.
craft, it was called replacement animation.
Yeah, yes.
It was called the series puppet. This was his invention. He didn't invent stop motion animation. He just, for your audience to fully understand what the difference is, the best example I can use is King Kong. King Kong, which was the first well-known stop motion animated armature, it was a single puppet, and it was animated. One puppet was used using an armature. An articulated armature was inside the puppet, and it was manipulated frame by frame. So every frame, you move the head, move the arm, move the arm, move this. It was done with one puppet. George came up with the idea of using multiple puppets to do his stop motion animation, which gave it a certain sense of fluidity. But to do multiple puppets, each one had to be crafted one after the other. So you'd have 100 different heads or 100 different legs or 100 different whatever, eyeballs, mouths. And there was a certain, almost, it's incredulous really today because you can't
Yeah,
do it really.
right.
It's too time intensive and too expensive. But it gave it a certain fluidity that's unlike anything you've ever seen before. And it's wood. Most of it's wood carvings, or later
Hmm.
on he got into other types of material, but it was mostly wood in the beginning. And that's what, when you watch the Puppetoons, you have to be, you're astonished when you see that that was what he was using, wood replacement figure puppets. So
Well, and
now
to
that
go with what you were just saying about the European connection, there's something that feels very old world about the whole thing.
it is old world, exactly. And that's why he brought over all his craftspeople from Europe when he had his studio. They were all the, like Duke Goldstone, who was one of the directors on the Puppetoons, who was the editor on Destination Moon and knew George for years. He's a wonderful man. He said there were many languages spoken at the Puppetoon studios. The people from all over the world were there, from different countries, uh, foreign backgrounds or whatever. And anyway, that's what made it great. What made it
Hmm.
great is having all that together in one place.
Yeah.
And doing the replacement figure puppet was an invention of his that has now started to return. And it's something that my making a Puppetoon movie documentary talks about a bit, where, if you look at Nightmare Before Christmas, for instance, or what Guillermo del Toro is doing, they're going back to George's invention of replacement figure puppets. That's why it has that incredible fluidity to it that you see.
Yeah. So it's the
And
mid 80s now, and you're starting to work on the Puppetoons movie. You're starting to collect this into a narrative that tells a story about this style, presenting a style really to a new generation. How long had it been since those had been displayed before you got involved with the first movie? 30
well, if you look, if
years?
you go back to television, maybe it
Yeah.
was 1951, 2, 3, 4, 5, it was during that time.
Hmm.
So from 55 to 65, 75, 85, 30, 35, 36 years
Was
maybe.
there any sort of a repertory screening scene for those shorts?
Yes. Yeah, when George was alive, they had the LA Film Festival, Filmex it was called at that
Okay.
time, had a retrospective in George's films, and they did a showing in the 70s. I have friends of mine that actually helped put that together. George was there, and they showed a number of his nitrate Puppetoons in Hollywood. And George was, very emotional when they did it. He was crying, actually. Couldn't believe the response he was getting for the Puppetoons. From his point of view, he thought they were forgotten at that point. But then when
Hmm.
people were seeing them for the first time on the screen, and everybody was there, all the Hollywood people were there to see them. For him, it was a big moment in his life. At least he was able to experience that before he passed away. That was in the mid '70s, something like that. And then after that, he did a lot of touring around the country. He was asked to talk at various film festivals, for instance, the Chicago Film Festival, the New York Film Festival, you know, and uh, and he would show his films. He'd have like a little reel of, he'd be able to show things to people. So he was getting a bit of that toward the end.
We say that the young people now say he got his flowers. So though he didn't get the industry recognition necessarily, he still got his flowers from the fans.
He got no question about it. Oh
Yeah.
my God. When he showed up at a convention, it was like today when you see people following a famous person, George Lucas. I know because I knew George. I know George, and he brought his script to George. He brought Star Wars to George. See, nobody was doing science fiction and fantasy in Hollywood but George Pal. If you
Hmm.
were doing science fiction and fantasy, it found its way to George Pal, just like I came to him. Everyone came to him because there wasn't anyone else doing it but him. Uh, the industry looked at science fiction and fantasy as a stepchild of the industry. They never viewed it as a real movie. It was always viewed as something B movie-ish, something like that. They were making westerns and dramas and musicals, but they weren't really doing science fiction and fantasy. It really is because of George and Ray, but they say Ray, but it really, really was George Pal, who was the first one to create science fiction as a platform for a mass audience. When Worlds Collide, War of the Worlds, Destination Moon, they were the first films in movie history to establish science fiction as a platform. Forbidden Planet was made because of War of the Worlds. Uh, Day the Earth Should Still happened to be made about the same time as Destination Moon, because Robert Wise told me that. He was influenced by Destination Moon. But then there were others after that. But I would say it was War of the Worlds primarily and Worlds Collide that launched the other movies that we just mentioned. Uh, MGM wanted to get into making science fiction. And Dory Sherry was the studio head at the time. And they wanted to be in the business of doing that because George had done War of the Worlds. So it's because of that that he put all that money into Forbidden Planet,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And then when George said he was wanted to leave Paramount, they brought him into MGM. So then they had their resident science fiction guy at MGM, and that was George Pal. So it's kind of an interesting thing how that sort of happened.
Hmm.
And
I distracted you from talking about the origin of the Puppetoons movie, so I'll lead you back there. You were talking
yeah,
about we're looking at the mid 80s now, and you're putting together the idea of a Puppetoons movie.
yeah, after I did that after the fantasy film worlds of George Pal, I had made this epic documentary which you haven't seen. You should see. I'm trying to get it shown more in theaters and things like that, but it's quite an epic documentary. It
Does it
has
have
every
home media representation? Is it on
It
disc?
does. It's but it's been out of print. You can find it on Amazon. I don't. I'm trying. I have it on the first Puppetoon movie that's been out of print now. It's on there. It really needs to be seen more, and I'm trying to get it out there so people can see it. Since the Puppetoon movie came out, there's been this desire from the public and from my own interest to try to get more of these Puppetoons restored. And because of rights issues from one studio to another, it was not really possible to really do it until in the past decade or more. The Republic Film Library was bought by Paramount, and I was after them for years to try to do this, but they wouldn't. They didn't want to do it. So I had to wait and wait and wait for decades, basically my whole life, frankly. And finally, they went ahead and they got them. And the way the story went is I was doing the TCM with Ben Mankiewicz. I was doing a 3-day George Pal tribute. A lot of your viewers may have seen that tribute I did. And they showed my films, and they showed about 8 of George's features over 2 or 3 days. And Jim Giannopoulos, who was the president of Paramount at the time, I wish he was the president now. He was really something. He was a big benefactor in the industry. He helped the motion picture home, and he was very interested in classic cinema and things of that kind. So they suggested I should contact him about my interest to try to restore the Puppetoons. So I did. He happened to be doing an interview on the same day that I was doing my TCM. And that afternoon, in another studio just a couple of blocks away, he was doing one on the motion picture home that ended up showing on the network kind of at the same time mine was being shown. And so it was coincidental, really. And TCM put me in touch with Jim, and I called him, and that's what kicked it off. It took about a year. I said, "Can I do it?" And blah, blah, blah. And eventually he opened the doors to Paramount, and he let me do whatever I wanted to do to get them restored. And that's when I got in touch with there's a lady named Thornburg who used to be the preservation head before Charlotte was there,
Hmm.
and I worked with them through the years, and they started preserving a lot of the subjects. So the bottom line is, because of their preservation efforts, I was then able to restore them, some of them, because the process is so expensive. And this was a big gain for me from Paramount. They were willing to preserve the successive exposure negatives, which I also should explain. It's very rare in the industry that successive exposure and negatives exist on short subjects. They exist for many feature films, but shorts were considered, nothing to movie theaters and studios. Most of the cartoons, things like that, a lot of it was discarded stuff, and only so few exist that actually have. And by the way, the audience may not even know what a successive negative is. The successive negative is the originally shot film that was made when the film was shot. So it's the actual negative. But what's a successive negative? In Technicolor, you had 3 strips. You had a red and a blue and a green. That's how Technicolor was made. So let's say The Wizard of Oz. You had 3 strips of film running simultaneously in a camera shooting the scene. And that's how it was shot, with 3 separate strips of film. And through a process of chemical dyes and all sorts of things, it was merged, it was recombined, is what they call it, into a single strip. And the quality of Technicolor, the reason that Technicolor is so extraordinary is it has this element of colored dyes, which are unreal. That's what gives those movies this almost fantastical look to them that cannot be duplicated today. It's a
Hmm.
unique quality. The Puppetoons were all shot in three strip Technicolor, but instead of strips, they came up with the idea of a successive negative, meaning that on a single strip of negative, there were 3 frames, boom, 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 for every single frame. So let's say there were 15,000 frames shot in a Puppetoon, which roughly there were 12,000, I think it was 12,000 frames for an 8-minute subject. But on a successive negative, there were 36,000 frames because you had a single frame 3 times for every frame. So it's 3 times.
Red, blue, green.
Red, blue, and green. That was
Yeah.
the dye. It was a black and white process, but they used the dyes to change the colors. It's a dye
Okay.
process, and that's how it was done. But there's something else that you have to understand, which is just insane. Technicolor required so much light to shoot. You had to have these giant arc lights. I'm sure you've heard the stories, like on The Wizard of Oz or Gone with the Wind. They had these huge lights on this. I mean, it made it so hot because the Technicolor required a tremendous amount of light output to be able to shoot those scenes, which made it even more horrible to make those films.
Yeah, could you imagine being in a costume, in a lion costume, and with all these lights, right?
Oh my God. And not to mention the makeup and all the effects. Everything was done practical effects. That's
Yeah.
another discussion we can have. But getting back to this, so when you shoot it, let's imagine a Puppetoon, for example. Okay, so you have a puppet.
Is that the average size of one of the puppets? It's smaller than I realized.
Oh, they're very small. This is
Oh.
from Rhythm in the Ranks. This was 1942, I think. This was nominated for an Academy Award. This is in one of my restoration special programs I put together. It's really an extraordinary film. So this is a single puppet. I'm just giving your audience an idea what a puppet is. So
And there'd
this
be
is a
maybe a
puppet
hundred of those, right?
or 1,000. You
Wow.
know, each puppet had a different expression, a different position. You had leg movements, arms, legs. Like I said, this happens to be one single puppet. So if you had if you were shooting it in Technicolor with a specially designed camera, so you would shoot this character. Let's say you positioned it with the right eyeballs and the right way the arm was supposed to move, and you had that particular position of that particular character, and then you shoot it with the camera in one frame. Okay. And then you had to shoot it a second time and a third time for each of the 3 frames. But because the light of Technicolor and the camera and the strength of the lighting you needed to have an exposure quality to it. So each frame had to be shot separately and exposed separately. So it would take something like a minute to expose a single frame of film. Each frame took 3 minutes to expose. You had 12,000 frames. You had 36,000 shots. And then you had a minute for each of those shots times 3. Now, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
In our world, this is inconceivable.
Hmm.
But you can imagine the craft to be able to do such a thing. And this is just the actual shooting of it. You had to manufacture these things. You had to time them out so they would actually be fluidly moving and stretch and move and everything. And when you watch a Puppetoon, all you can do is stand there and have your mouth gaping when you realize what you're watching with a Puppetoon.
It shouldn't exist.
It should not exist. It is beyond comprehension.
Hmm.
And that's what is so amazing about them. And then you see them with music and dancing and singing, and they're doing this and doing that, and they're flying, and they're leaping, and they're twirling, and they're, it's absolutely bizarre and out of this world. And that's why the Disney animators, and Floyd Norman, by the way, we interviewed in mine recently. He's 90 years old in that interview. He's just still alive,
Wow.
and he saw them when he was a kid in the 1940s. He couldn't believe it. And so that's the kind of response you get from the people who saw them when they first came out.
Hmm.
So when people see them today, they get that same impression. I have to explain a little bit.
Right.
I have to say, now, you know what you're watching here, by the way.
How many of them are there? How many did George Pell make? How many shorts?
I say total in Europe, he probably made over 100
Wow.
Puppetoons.
Wow.
From the time he started, he made European films, and then he came over here. In the United States, he probably made about 40 45
Okay.
Puppetoons, something like that. And uh, and so each Puppetoon took about 6 to 8 months to make each Puppetoon. So
Wow.
5 to 8 minute subject took about 6 to 8 months to do, basic.
And so Paramount had the successive film negatives, is what you were saying.
Paramount had the success of negative. It isn't because of Paramount. It's really because of the companies before Paramount. It was Republic and the companies that had it before them that they preserved them. Now, I stayed in touch with the guy who was the archivist at Republic. I was in touch with him for 25 or 30 years. Always ask him, okay, how are the Puppetoons? Are okay? Oh, yeah, they're fine. He takes them out. He looks at them. He checks them, makes sure they're aired out. They look fine. There's no vinegar. These are all nitrates, by the way. So everything is in good shape, and he keeps them in the right. So I was on top of it to make sure there was no problems. However, in recent years, there have been some problems. There have been a couple of Puppetoons that have had some vinegar damage and nitrate damage. As soon as that happens, uh, Laura Thornburg would call me from Paramount. They get a call from UCLA Archive who has them, and they say, "You got a problem here. You got to get this thing preserved now."
Hmm.
And so when they get that call, and that's happened on not just Puppetoons, but on feature films, you got a problem here. They the emergency bells go off, and they go right into getting it preserved, or they do whatever they have to do to make sure, because that's the last time that piece of film is ever going to be able to be utilized again.
Yeah.
And it's happened on two Puppetoons now, and there's two of them that are probably not usable anymore. And most of the films are. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So so here we are with where I've probably restored. Uh, I would say I probably restored of the 100 films, probably restored maybe 50 of them, say 45 or
Wow.
50 of them, I would say. And so it's really quite a remarkable thing. I mean, so I suggest very strongly that your audience buy this. What happens with these discs? These are limited editions. This is volume 3.
Okay.
Okay.
And where would they go to get that?
Puppetoon.net. You can also get it on Amazon. You can also get it on eBay. The reason you need to get this is one of a kind. The thing about the restorations that I'm doing is they have a 30-page color booklet. They're collectible in that respect. They have the restorations I've mentioned. They're dual layer, so they have the highest level you can for a Blu-ray. And the rights, there is limitation on the rights. They're not forever. And so each one of these have a limited edition quality to them. I have to renew it each time if I want to do it. So there's only so many left. Volume 2 is already in the collectible world.
Mm.
These are selling for up to $250 each now. You can probably get it on Amazon for $150. It started out at about 49, but the run is over. There's no more to be done on this one. So these are gone into a collectible state, and this is also going to go in a collectible state probably in a year or two. So if you want it, get it now before the prices go up, because they will go up, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's the collector's market that does that. I have no control over it.
Right.
This is the first Puppetoon movie. This one is selling for $350 now if you can find it. This is out of print. This one, it doesn't even exist anymore. This was the first one that we did, and they are limited. It's not forever. Each one is different. Each one has extras that others don't have. So it's a very specialized thing. I get people that want this all the time. I've only got maybe a handful of them. And, I tell them what it is, and there's nothing I can do about it. You can get it between 150 and $300 now, this one. And I'm not saying, I'm sorry to say that, because I have no control over it. That's what the collector's market has done to it. So, but it's worth this one. At least you can get for somewhat of a bargain for now. I
Yeah.
think this is the best one of all of them, in
Oh,
my
do you?
opinion. Yeah. Then now the one that's coming next is going to be the restored version. That's from the 4K restoration. So the one that's coming next, I took the original negative of this. This comes from a inner positive. An inner positive was an intermediary negative that was made. I never let the negative out because I was afraid that it could be damaged. So I never let any distributor use it before. So I took the original negative that I keep in storage and I took it out. I just did this two years ago for the first time. I had it scanned in 5K on a laser graphic scanner. There's a lady that did this for me. And so this is the new version that's coming is a 5K, it's actually 4K restoration, and it looks amazing. I mean, there's no scratches and spots. We took out all the defects. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And so that's coming out in probably next March or April. Maybe we'll do another show when it comes out,
Sure, we should.
so you can see it because that one's a big deal. And then I'm going to have the extras, the one you have with the documentary I made. It's got about 10 extras. I have
It's a great
seven.
documentary, by the way, because I've seen it, I can say that
So,
it's really informative. You got Joe Dante there. You've got Dennis Muren is in it, and who else do you want to talk about that's in there? A
no,
lot of people,
Dennis Muren, ILM, a visual
of
effects
course. Yeah,
supervisor, Phil Tippett, who worked with Dennis on Star Wars and Starship Troopers and a lot of movies. He did Dragon Slayer, the first one with the dragon. That was his animation. Phil is great. These are all George Powell fans, by the way. They
yeah.
all admired him. Dennis was great because he could talk about George Lucas and all the connection, which was nice.
Hmm.
Floyd Norman, who is the Walt Disney animator, he did Sleeping Beauty. He's the only one alive. He did Sleeping Beauty. He did The Jungle Book with Walt Disney himself. He's in the documentary. He's 90. Bob Kurtz with Kurtz and Friends, who's very famous in commercials, and he did the opening credits of a lot of movies like City Slickers and all kinds of films you've seen. The opening credits, Kurtz did all those things. he he's in it. He was great actually. And Joe Dante, Mick Garris, who is a director, producer. He did a lot of horror pictures. He did Critters. He's done a lot of. He did many of the amazing stories for Spielberg and Screen Novelties. A couple of guys there that run Screen Novelties. Seamus Walsh and Mark Caballero are also did something. It's a host of people that are in it. Jerry Beck, who's an animation historian. Um, and you're actually the first person I've talked to who's seen it. And I'm curious what else you would have to say about it?
Oh, I thought it was wonderful. It was informative. It does not feel sometimes those behind the scenes features can feel a little I don't know. Hagiography is a word that comes to mind. They can feel a little worshipy, little like they're selling you something. And I didn't get that from this. It really just because it felt like fans talking about something that they love, which is exactly what it is. And that connects with a good viewing experience that makes you, it doesn't feel. I'm very sensitive to things that make me feel like I'm being sold something. And I didn't get that from this. So I thought it was great.
I wanted for the first time to really explain how it all happened. You
Yes.
know, why did this happen? And then it kind of left it. I wanted to get myself out of it halfway. I didn't want to be in the thing anymore. I said said enough. I kept my comments very brief and to the point. I didn't tell you everything. I didn't go into every detail. I didn't want to do that. I just gave enough of it, and then I let George Powell kind of play out. I kind of
Hmm.
wanted it to play out on its own, in its
Yeah.
own way. I wanted to take a life of its own. It's kind of what happened. And it turned out better than I thought because I had no idea what I was doing when I was making it. I mean, I really, honestly,
That's
I
not
just,
true.
I, I
That
just
can't be
jumped,
true.
I just jumped into it. I said, I need to do this. I didn't really know what I was going to do. And when you're making a documentary or you're doing any of these, sometimes you don't even know what you're doing. I just let it kind of go. And it just kind of went from da 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 da
Right.
da da.
Well, I think that you can have an outline for a documentary, but the documentary will reveal what it needs to be as you go on.
It does. It revealed itself, and I was kind of pleased. And people, even when I was doing the interviews with a lot of the people, I wasn't even sure at the time, and then it just sort of came. It's sort of miracle, kind of a miracle thing.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the fantasy film worlds. When you see that, I think you'll enjoy it. We had a screening at the Frida last I think it was April we did it at the Frida, and there were people with tears in their eyes. I mean,
I
after the
bet.
film, they come up to me, uh, the fans, the people that grew up with Pal. Paul Frees also narrated it. Guy came up to me. He was such a Paul Frees fan. By the way, does your audience, do they know Paul Frees?
I mean,
Okay,
I'm going to assume, but let's tell he's the voice of the Haunted Mansion. I mean, he's a prolific voice actor.
he's the ghost host. He's
Yes.
Pillsbury Doughboy. He's Ludwig von Drake. He's like 1,000 things that was in movies. And he was the greatest voice guy in movie history, in my opinion. And I got to work with him on his very last, before he passed away, the last two things he ever did was my two
Wow.
projects. And he was the nicest guy in the world. And it's just such an honor. I mean, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky. I mean, I'm so lucky in my life to have been able. This is a miracle.
That gratitude is a key. I think that's key because you're not jaded, you're not cynical about it. It's what you were talking about earlier. Gratitude, it goes a long way. It's important to show, to have just the appreciation for like, how lucky am I that you got to tell that story. You got to capture those people on camera and tell that story.
And they while they were alive, and it was just, I don't know. I'm just the luckiest person on the planet. I have to be, and it's a miracle for me. I think myself all the time, why me? Why did it happen to me? How come it was me? So the answer to that, it has to be, a lot of people believe in guides and angels. I mean, I know this is going to get a little crazy, but people believe that in the afterlife, if there is such a thing, you know, it exists, and that these things exist. Maybe there is an influence in our life. Maybe it isn't just over when we're dead. Maybe there is something after it. Maybe there are guides. Maybe those things, and maybe that's what it's happened. Maybe George wanted this to happen. Maybe he did. Maybe George wanted this to happen. Maybe George is speaking to me. Bob Kurtz said at the end of the film, he said the most wonderful thing. He said, maybe George is speaking to us. He's still talking to us now,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thought. It's a wonderful thought that could possibly be true, you
It's
know?
it is a wonderful thought, but do not discount yourself and the initiative that you took to take the step to tell the story.
Well, I appreciate that. It's great, man. It's an emotional experience for me. The whole thing has been a journey that can't be described. And by the way, I also did this. I happen to have it sitting here. This is the time machine.
Is that the soundtrack?
Yes.
Okay.
In 1980s, Russell Garcia, who did the original score to the movie, we recorded this in Munich, Germany. When I did the Puppetoon movie, they did it also at the Gronchi Orchestra, and so we did a rescoring of it. It's a remastering of this. I just remastered it in 2000 in just 2 years ago. I did a new remaster of this, and it's the original score of the Time Machine, which I consider to be one of the greatest science fiction scores ever done for a movie. And the reason it's so great is it has heart. It
Hmm.
has that, I don't know, wonderful, beautiful feeling about it. It's just beautiful. So
Well, we're
I,
so far from scores in movies now. Scores now are just basically tones or, like brrr, but when George Lucas, to go back to George Lucas, made hired John Williams to do these orchestral scores for Star Wars and Indiana Jones, that was a throwback to the people that you're talking about. That was unconventional at the time, and to go back to those original scores of adventure movies and science fiction movies of the 1940s and the 1950s, they sound so good. They are so adventurous and powerful and moving, and they tell part of the story.
I would strongly suggest people, many of people in your audience may even know about this, but this is an important album. It's a very important album. James Horner was influenced by this. When I did the remake with Klaus Badalt, who did Pirates of the Caribbean, he also did Our Time Machine. We used this as a template for what the score should sound like. And that's why the new score to the Time Machine sounds the way it does. It has that wonderful, heartfelt, emotional thread going all the way through it, this feeling of love and emotion and connection. And that's what this is. That's how this happened for George. This score Russ did, it's the greatest score that he ever did, and it's probably the greatest movie that George Pal ever did as far as just the film he directed. So it's a
Well,
kind
it's
of
the one that
merging.
hooked you. It hooked you in 1960 when you were, what'd you say, you were 9 years old.
I was 9 years old. It hooked me.
Yeah,
I mean, some people were hooked by War of the Worlds. Some people hooked
right.
by other films. And yeah, they are. They're great. War of the Worlds is undeniable. Incredible movie. It moves like crazy. Byron Haskin was the director. And boy, oh boy, he directed it like a war film. It's literally like a war film.
Oh yeah.
There isn't a second in that movie that goes by when you watch that film. There isn't a second that goes by that you're not completely on it every
Hmm.
second. The movie's amazing because of it. No, that was a greatly well directed film. Tremendous. Time Machine has a wonderful just a wonderful feeling about it, heart to it, and I think the music lends itself for that movie, that story of the Morlocks and the Eloi. What I want to do in the next one is I want to do a healing story. My thinking is my concept for trying to do the new film, and this is just so people, I'll let people know ahead of time that what I'd like to do is I want a more of a healing film. I want to build a better tomorrow is my feeling. I want to do what George was trying to do because he always looked beyond today. His philosophy was uh, uh, about a better tomorrow
Hmm.
because he went through a lot of strife in his life. He had to escape the Nazis in Europe to come over to the United States. He had catastrophe. His house burned down when he was in Los Angeles. He lost everything. They lost things in their life, but he was always able to rise above it. I learned this from Mrs. Powell. Even in the tremendous tragedy in his life, he was always able to rise above it and go beyond, you know. And he always said that. He used to say, people would say, "Well, what's your favorite film? What's the thing you like to do best?" He said, "The next one." He was always thinking about beyond the
Hmm.
next one. What's a better world? What's a better way to tell a story? And that's what I see for this new film. I want to go into the future and I want to repair and heal what's happened. I want to make a better tomorrow. I want to make a better world, a
We need
positive
that.
world.
Our entertainment sphere does not have a lot of hope in it right now. There's so much darkness and grimness and cynicism and violence. If there's going to be a new time machine, I hope that it has hope.
That's my hope of hope. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do.
Hope. Arnie, this has been an incredible conversation and very educational. And I know you want people to check this work out. Where should they go? You said puppetoon.net. Is the soundtrack at puppetoon.net?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah,
So that's sort of
Puppetoon,
a one-stop shop.
you can get Puppetoon 2, Puppetoon 3, Time Machine, and when the soundtrack. And when the new one comes out next year, it'll be on puppetoon.net as well. It will also be on Amazon eventually. It'll be on eBay. But what I do is I put it on puppetoon.net first.
Okay.
That's where I started out because that's where the demographic is for the people that are interested. Because all the followers we have are the animation people, people that are in that world of Disney. They all kind of converge at the beginning. And then as time goes on, I kind of spread it out and I put it in the other mode, but I kind of want Puppetoon on net to be the first. And then, people can reach me through that info@puppetoon.org, I think is the email address if they need to reach me for any reason or ask questions or that kind of thing. And, um, and then I'll keep you posted on future things that are happening, screenings and so forth.
Do
Yep.
you list your screenings anywhere? I know you're doing a lot of you're going around and showing these things. Where can people find out about that? Are you on like Facebook or anything like that?
There's a YouTube channel. It's called Puppetoon. It's a
Okay.
Puppetoon channel. I have the Forbidden Planet I mentioned to you. I don't know if we're covering that, but yeah, it's on there. The one I did in the Time Machine and so forth. So if they go to Puppetoon on YouTube, you'll see a trailer. You'll see something about it on there. So yes, I do that. And there is a Facebook page if anyone's interested. I have a Facebook page on the Puppetoons. And if you look up George Powell Puppetoons or you look up George, you'll see it. It'll come up. I have several pages on Facebook. If they want to follow it on Facebook. My profile page is my name, Arnold Leibovit, my name. I think that's what they do on Facebook. And
I'll link to it.
yeah, and I also have a group page, a page of the people that help promote and preserve and support the Puppetoons. There's a preservation group page also I created It's called the Supporters of the Puppetoon, blah, blah, blah. That's on there as well. So I got all those things going on. And when I get the time machine going, I'll probably create a time machine one too, I
There you go.
suppose,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's coming. That's coming. So it's a lot to do. Hope I'm gonna be around a while. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Yeah, I was
And
gonna say, let's just put a pin in this one for now, and we'll meet again. We'll talk again in a few months when there's more to discuss.
absolutely, we come back again, and I hope everything is well with you and going and continues to do well. I enjoy. I've watched many of your shows, and it's great. I think what you're doing is great, by the way.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
It's great to support the media, and you're doing a good job of it, which is great. I mean, I appreciate your interest in classic cinema. I think it's great.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Mr. Leibovit, it's been a joy to talk to you, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Ta ta.